Hi.
What was that?
It's National Doughnut Week. It's National Doughnut Week, man.
I know. I unfortunately, so do they.
Oh, those are good. This week on Quality Digest Live, we'll find out why lean flourishes when assumptions diminish.
The assumption that you should eat that donut should diminish. Plus, analyzing Takt time in healthcare. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for May 20, June 3rd, 5th.
June 5th. It's National Donut Day. How could you forget
How can I forget it's National Donut Day?
June 5th.
May 22nd was National Something Else Day.
That's right.
It's June 5th, National
June
Donut Day.
5th, 2015.
Too much sugar.
That's right.
And we're at Quality Digest.
That's right.
And that's right. And QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality.
And donuts.
I'm Dirk, never saw a donut he couldn't eat, Ducharme, editor-in-chief of Quality Digest.
And I am Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. All right, we're going to get away from donuts for a moment and start the show this week with the latest turn in the saga of General Motors' faulty ignition switches, which of course appeared in popular GM models such as the Chevy Cobalt and the Saturn Ion from 2003 through 2011. As those of you who've been following the story know, this widespread safety scandal and critical quality failure led to massive recalls, a number of high-profile firings, and most important, of course, more than 100 consumer deaths. Now, in a story appearing on Yahoo News that we linked to in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily, comes word that the United States Department of Justice is considering prosecuting General Motors over this tragic series of events. These events were tragic, of course, but as we are learning now, they were also avoidable, and that's why the DOJ may be stepping in with penalties that could extend beyond fines, which incidentally are likely to be in the billions of dollars. Yep, we're talking about criminal prosecution here and maybe even jail time for former GM workers. In a nutshell, certain GM employees apparently knew that the ignition switches being placed into millions of GM cars had an issue that could cause that car to lose power if the ignition mechanism was bumped or rattled. This issue was the direct cause of fatal accidents as early as 2003, yet instead of revealing the problem and taking steps to fix it, these employees allegedly now covered up the issue, even going so far as to confuse internal investigators by switching lot numbers on parts. The conspiracy, and that I think is a proper name for it, stretched from engineering to management to GM's legal team, and to date has resulted in the termination of 15 GM employees. The culture of GM at the time has been blamed by some of those fired workers as the root cause of this situation. Of course, a decade ago, GM was feeling the pinch financially and was on the road to a major federal bailout. Corners were cut, and if these disgraced workers are to be believed, that filtered down throughout the organization, and critical red light safety issues such as this one with these ignition switches were ignored or hushed up. Now, I think we can't pretend that GM is the only one that has this type of an issue. Toyota had their own scandal to deal with recently, as we know, dealing with the so-called sticky accelerator pedals, and they too were less than forthcoming with internal and external investigators at various times throughout that process. Also this week, we learned of charges for 42 individuals responsible in one way or another for the Bangladesh factory fire that killed more than 1,000 workers in that country in 2013. The bottom line is that local and federal justice officials are no longer going to settle for large fines in the most egregious of these cases. Criminal prosecution, yes, incarceration, are imminently possible. Now, how high up in any given organization these investigations may go is still something of an open question, but there's no question that people are angry, governments are listening, and that companies and those that run them, which are ultimately responsible for safeguarding their customers and their employees' lives, must be ever vigilant and transparent. Sad state of affairs. I mean, a tangled mess at GM. Mary Barra has been in front of Congress to address it. The GM is forthcoming now in terms of trying to get to what happened and of course making amends. But we're going back 12 and more years now, and this was a very ugly situation at GM. Whether it was a cultural issue, whether it was individual employees. Again, the DOJ is going to be rolling up their sleeves and looking at this, and yeah, there might be some federal charges and some incarcerations coming down the pike.
Well, I think if you start putting some real bite in it, these large corporations, fines they're a nuisance, but they don't do a heck of a lot. But if you start sending people to jail, maybe something else is going to happen.
Well, yeah, and certainly in Bangladesh, those 42 people are almost certainly going to be, I think they've been charged, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually incarcerated themselves, most if not many of those. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, I just got back from a big user conference in Las Vegas. This was Hexagon Live 2015, or Hexagon. Hexagon, HXGN Live 2015. It's a user conference, and it's for everything related to Hexagon products. And for those of you who work out there, you know that Hexagon is metrology equipment, but it's much more than that. There's geospatial, process power and marine, security, government infrastructure, and a lot more. So think in general, measuring, mapping, and asset tracking across many industries in many different ways. But one of the things that they do have there, which was interesting to me, it's like a lot of user conferences, they have a lot of informational tracks that you can go to, seminars that you can go to. And for Hexagon, very often, they're not related to products necessarily, they're related to just topics that might be interesting to industry professionals. So one of them I went to was on collaborative robots, and this was a 1 hour presentation given by Julie Shaw, who is an associate professor at the Department of Aeronautics and Astronomics at MIT. And what she was dealing with is a very up-and-coming topic, collaborative robots. Now, typically when we think of robots, we think of industrial robots, and maybe some of you have those in your organization, in your shop. But these are always blocked off from human beings. They're always behind a fence or some sort of shield. And if there's a door, if you open the door, there's an interlock which shuts down the robots. And that's because robots can kill you. They're big, they're heavy, they move fast, and they're very powerful. So if you happen to get in the way of them, not so good. So, but the problem with that is that in order to use a robotic cell, you have, let's say, a human cell that creates part of the part. Then it has to be transported to a robotic cell where it's worked on, and then it has to be transported to a human cell where it's worked on again. So you're doing things in series rather than in parallel. And this is usually, from an efficiency point of view, not that good. Yeah, you get a lot of efficiency from the robotics aspect of it, but you're losing efficiency in that you aren't doing things side by side, human and robots. So the goal is to be able to have humans and robots working side by side. And MIT has done a lot of study on this, a lot of stuff going on. So the first thing they pointed out was, well, maybe if we can have a robot automatically avoid a human. And the example they gave, a study they're doing with Boeing, let's say you have a big old long fuselage, and there's multiple robots on tracks working on different parts of the fuselage. Now, a human enters an area that is controlled by a robot. Now, the typical way of handling this would simply be to automatically shut the robot off, and then it just sits there, not doing anything, while the human is safe, but you're losing productivity. So they have developed algorithms where the robot, rather than just stop, it simply moves to another part of the fuselage and continues working. So the human is safe, the human can do what they need to do on the fuselage or in that area, and the robot continues working, albeit in a different area. So there's no productivity loss. So avoidance, that's a good thing. But even better is if robots can literally work with humans on the same product. So think in terms of, let's say the robot picks up a box and it hands it to you and you put some screws into it. And the robot rotates the box and you put some more screws in it and the robot sets it back over there. Well, that's great. Now you two are both working together in parallel on working on this product. And the way that's done is they simply create steps for the robot. Go to the freezer, get the box. Come over here, give it to Mike. Mike does the thing, take it back, put it in the freezer. Now the problem with that is that you as a human are locked into the steps that the robot's doing. The robot's going to put the thing here, you have to do your thing, the robot moves to the bay, you're locked in, the robot's locked in. More productive, it's still good, but even better is if the robot could adapt to your movements. Now, one thing that humans are very good at is optimizing their actions. If I was to say, Mike, what I need you to do is take this box, fold this flap in, fold this flap in, fold this flap in, and tuck in a tab. And you'd go, okay, I get it. And you would start fold, 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 tab, fold, 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 tab. But eventually you'd begin to realize, wait a minute, I can go a little bit faster if I fold both these sides in at the same time. So as a human, we're really good at optimizing. The problem is that's going to throw the robot off, unless you've got a smart robot. And the other thing that MIT is working on is that the robots detect this subtle change in your process and they adapt to the process. So now you don't have to work in lockstep. The robot works with you. But it goes a step further. But wait, there's more. Too much sugar. As good as humans are at optimizing, computers sometimes can be better. So now what if the robot could teach you how to optimize? Well, that is the big question, is how do you do that? How do you get the robot to subtly inform you that, Mike, here is a trick. Here's something that you might be able to do that will optimize your actions. And to do it in such a way that it's done in real time, that the robot kind of hints to you, kind of nudges you in the right direction, so the robot starts training you in optimization.
Fold those two at the same time, right?
Fold those two, yeah, I mean, there's, and that is kind of where we're at right now. I mean, she was a fascinating presenter, and we're going to try to get her back on the show. But that's what's going on with robotics. It was a fascinating track.
Yeah, and just one thing of what was going on at Hexagon Live.
Oh yeah, no, there's tons. I mean, it goes on for 3 days. There's all sorts of informational stuff. Some of it's related to their products, obviously, and how to use their products. It is a user conference after all. But there's a lot of really interesting informational tracks, including another one we'll try to report on again the skill gap.
Yeah.
And they had a great presentation from the president of workforce.com, or one of the guys from workforce.com, talking about what they're doing and what they're seeing in terms of the skills gap. Interesting discussion.
Great. And you got some good tech corners we're going to be seeing on the
and
show.
yes, exactly. We got some good tech corners as well.
We'll be
showing.
looking at those in the coming weeks and months as well.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Dirk, for that report from Vegas. Good job. All right. Well, Succeeding with Lean When You Don't Know Anything by Brian Maskell appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Well, you know, Dirk, this is an idea that appeals to me immensely.
Because we don't know anything.
You know, the notion that the less you know, the better you will be at undertaking continuous improvement activities, that's great. I mean, really, if that one's true, folks, then I might be a guru whose powers even exceed those of Deming, Ono, and Duran, all put together. Well, all right, maybe not. But I kid, definitely. And I think that knowledge is a good thing, and Maskell isn't arguing in this article that it's not, but he is saying that there's such a thing as too much knowledge, too much expertise, and that can bog down lean improvement initiatives. It's more than a bit counterintuitive, but when you read through this article, his logic, I think, is pretty much inescapable of what he's saying here. Because as Maskell points out, in many traditional top-down, non-lean enterprises, when problems arise, as they inevitably do, the company calls in experts to fix them, right? These are generally folks, these experts, with a lot of experience and know-how. And what do? They attack the problems vigorously in one department, then they turn to others in sequence. And the problem here, first of all, there's a couple problems there, but first of all, the problem is that these experts aren't usually the ones that are actually doing the work. So they can't really appreciate some of the subtleties of the problems and how they affect not just departments, but entire value streams across the enterprise, right? Again, they're looking at individual silos and departments, but they're not getting a perspective on how the work flows throughout the entire department, the entire enterprise when they're doing it that way. Worse than that, I think, is these experts are experts because they know how to do things, and experts who know how to do things are usually really good at doing those same things time and time again. I mean, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? I mean, these people became experts because they know how to do what they know how to do. Experts, consultants, trainers, all those folks that are external to your organization often drop into an organization with a uniform, inflexible set of guiding principles that have worked for them for many years. And it's possible that those marching orders might work okay for you too, and they might correct some of the issues in your organization in the short term. But they're never going to really heal broken processes as well as those that are going to be uncovered and implemented by those who are closest to the process in question, those that are actually doing the work. We always hear this in Lean. Get the people that are doing the work to come up with a solution. They'll be much more bought in to that. So the question is, what is a better way to achieve the sustainable continuous improvement that we all want in an organization? Well, first of all, I think you want to try to rely on the real experts close at hand, those in the organization, again, that are already doing the work. Set them loose with a solid plan, do, check, act, problem-solving methodology. That's right, good old PDCA is the best way to discover how to improve based on observation and hard data, not expertise in a vacuum. The real experts, your experts, don't need to know everything. Again, as Maskell points out, better that they start from a position of not knowing anything so that a proper investigation can occur. You see, assumptions are killers when you're striving for lean improvement. The human mind has a dastardly tendency to want to fit evidence into a pre-existing thesis, which in many cases has been reached on nothing but a gut level opinion. I mean, you look at your processes with fresh eyes and open ears and all your senses, and if you walk the Gemba, if you stand in an owner circle, you're going to see waste that you've never seen before. And it can happen. It can happen if you wipe away those preconceived notions and the we've always done it that way, or worse than that, we have to do it that way kind of attitude. And that's what Maskell's saying here, is that knowledge isn't bad, right? But knowledge and preconceived notions that you assume if you're an expert that you know what's going on and how to fix it, that can be bad. And that's not lean, because lean really is this idea that you're going to investigate with an open mind. PDCA, again, is a really good tool for doing that. Investigate with an open mind with the people that are actually doing the work, finding the solutions that can work long term. That's going to be a much better way to approach it.
Right. I like the idea of wiping away assumptions, and it is really hard to do. And I think, we talked about, like you mentioned there, the Ono circle or going to the Gemba. But even then, your observations can be clouded by assumptions, because then it comes down to interpretation. It's still easy to fit what you're seeing into your assumption of what is happening or what should be happening, and because even what we perceive, we run through a filter. So I think there's still a challenge in wiping away those assumptions, even if you're being presented with raw data. How are you filtering that data? What are you doing with it?
Yeah, no doubt, they're important, and good piece. Brian Maskell is a very
sure,
well-known, regarded lean expert. And he's got some really good advice there. So check out that article. Again, as always, all of our articles below the player page right down there, so check them out.
That's right. Well, Takt time, T-A-K-T, some of you are familiar with that. That is the average unit production time needed to meet customer demand. So an example of that is if I have a customer that needs me to deliver 60 peeled apples in 1 hour, then my Takt time for peeling an apple is 1 minute. I must be able to peel an apple in under 1 minute in order to meet customer demand of 60 apples per hour. So it's a simple calculation, available time divided by demand. Easily understood and calculated in a continuous flow manufacturing environment. But what about Takt time for something like a hospital? That's the question asked by Jim Bevier in his article, Using Takt Time in Healthcare. As Bevier points out, at a hospital, you never know how many people are going to show up at the door. It's not a production line. But that's if you look at the hospital as a whole. If you start to drill down into operations of discrete departments and functions, well, maybe you get another story, and that's worth looking at. And by the way, before we get into an example of Takt time in healthcare, you probably should ask, why? Why should I care about Takt time? It's the backbone for resource planning to match demand, says Bevier. If you match resources, healthcare workers in this case, to demand, sick people, you're not demanding impossible performance from your staff, or you're not having your staff stand around with doing nothing. You're matching demand to requirement. So, Bevier gives an example. Patient discharge from a medical surgical floor. It's bumpy, it's seemingly unplanned, and it's a vexing process, says Bevier. It's complicated. It involves a minimum of 4 and usually more than 10 healthcare workers from multiple departments. So how do you calculate the Takt time for this surgical floor? Well, first, you have to understand and define the demand. How many discharges are handled on this floor, and when do they occur? So Bevier collected data on the number of discharges by day and by hour and by shift for the past 3 months, and he chose that as a starting point. He broke these down by shifts and recorded the highest central tendency of the data during the past 3 months. And we have the data we can show you right here. Okay, so what this data shows, you can see, your total demand in the lower right corner there is 68, and you can see there's a lot of variance between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So what does this show us? Well, we can look at the average demand by week, day, and shift and calculate a Takt time for each period. The weekly Takt time is calculated as follows. You take the available time, which is 7 days times 24 hours times 60 minutes per hour, or 10,080 minutes. Divide that by 68 discharges, and you come up with a Takt time of about 2 hours and 28 minutes for patients. Now, this is the pace at which the patient should be moving out the door if we were able to distribute our demand evenly across the entire week. So one patient would be discharged every 2.5 hours. But of course, discharges aren't level across the week. It's a hospital. It has cycles. So to make this useful, we take the weekly Takt time and we dive a little deeper, says Bevier. So if you calculate Takt time for each day, for instance, you get this. Take a look at slide 2. So now what we're seeing is we're drilling down by the Takt time by day. So here we've got the average Takt time for each day of the week is 24 hours times 60 minutes per hour, 1,440 minutes divided by the daily demand, and you can see that we're starting to see some shifts in our Takt time. You're starting to see big differences in the days. But wait, there's still more. Let's focus on just one shift. Let's look at the evening shift and calculate the pace necessary to meet the average demand of each day of the week just for that shift. And let's bring that data up. So here are the Takt times for the evening shift. Now we're starting to see something really interesting. Notice the Takt time for Friday evening, after everybody's leaving the bars, is 48 minutes, a lot more patients. And versus, let's say, Tuesday or Wednesday, middle of the week, not much going on there. So an entirely different story from Tuesday and Wednesday versus Friday evenings, right? Now you can start asking the right questions about demand. And Bevier gives us a few to chew on. First, how do we resource this unit at this evening to smooth out the workflow? How do we resource this unit so it can meet the demand? Is the day shift maybe under-resourced, so demand gets pushed to the evenings? Maybe that's why they're getting so busy. Maybe we can manage some of the demand on different days or shifts. Is the work required to discharge a patient being done on the day of the discharge? Again, we're talking about pushing things back. Do we create batches of work, which unnecessarily stresses downstream departments? That's the problem with batching. Things like, let's say, patient transport or pharmacy. Very often, those are done in batches. The pharmacy all of a sudden gets a whole batch of requirements from a shift, as opposed to it being doled out as it comes in, right? So now all of a sudden, they've got to deal with all this pharmaceutical requirements, and those get pushed back up to the patients, and nursing staff has to distribute them. So that's a problem going there. So all of this stuff can cause waiting and delays, and you can probably, if you work in health care, think of a lot more. So understanding Takt time gives you the platform to start asking the right questions about your processes. It helps you staff intelligently and not just by gut feel. In order to staff up to meet demand, you need to understand the cycles of work required for each discharge, in this case, and who does that work and how much time it takes. How much of the discharge work is actually adding value? What are the wastes in the processes? Where are the wastes in the workflows? What other work is being done by the operators who are involved in the discharge process? Bevier ends with this quote: "An organization that operates based on Takt time with staff doing value-added work that is high quality, has the shortest possible lead time, and expends only the necessary resources demonstrates respect for both workers and patients." There you go. Balancing demand. I mean, that's important for you. You don't want people standing around, and you don't want them overworked. In a non-continuous flow environment, it's very difficult to balance those resources.
Yeah, it's muda. I mean, it comes down to muda. It comes down to waste and driving waste out of the system. And as that last slide, as that quote shows, respect for people as well. Those two things, I think, really to me are the core of lean. Right. Are flowing work, to eliminate waste, and to respect the people that are doing the work. If you do those two things, I think you're going to have a lean operation. And if you're not doing those two things, you should start doing those two things, and you should be able to lean out your operation, hopefully fairly quickly.
Takt time, another tool in your quiver.
Definitely. Good stuff there. Thanks, Dirk. All right. Well, final article we have for you today is one called Return on Investment and Your Personality Type by Michelle Labrosse, and that appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Well, you know, I love those touchy-feely kind of articles, Dirk. I love the touchy-feely. This one right here is right up my alley. I really like Michelle Labrosse's stuff always. She's a long-time QD contributor. who usually writes about how to better manage projects. Project management is what her specialty is, and she often looks at the emotional side of the equation. Of course, she deals with the hard data as well of how you improve projects, but she thinks about it from the perspective of how you as a project manager can bring your emotions into it and manage your emotions better and get better results from that. So here she goes off of that same tangent pretty much, and she uses the Myers-Briggs psychological typing methodology to discuss how your personality affects setting and achieving goals, both personal and professional. Now, in case you don't know, the Myers-Briggs personality typing methodology, again, considers personality from the perspective of 4 axes of information and 4 perspectives on how you are and how you handle and deal with the world. The first is introversion versus extroversion. The next is sensing versus intuition. Third is thinking versus feeling. And the fourth and final one is judging versus perceiving. And if you take all those and you look at all of the different combinations, there's actually 16 different personality types that you get out of that. And depending on what you are with those 4 categories, it kind of defines a little bit about how you deal with things. Now, for instance, I'm an INTJ. That's what I've done when I've taken the Myers-Briggs in the past. I'm an INTJ. I'm actually kind of right down the middle on all of them. I'm not really very far to the side in either of them, but I definitely skew towards being an INTJ, which is introverted, intuitive, thinking, judging. LaBrosse, as she mentions in the piece, is an ENTP, which is an extroverted, intuitive, thinking, perceiving person. So she and I are similar in 2 of the axes, and we're different in 2 others, and that makes a lot of difference in how we tend to approach life and work. Michelle then puts that into perspective by considering capital, and she talks about this with the perspective of return on investment and how you maximize your return on investment by using this tool. And she looks at ROI in 5 actually areas, but one of them she kind of puts to the side because the financial ROI is one that everybody always focuses on. She's not looking at that. She wants to look at the other 4 types of capital, which she defines as social, knowledge, brand, and infrastructure. Those are the 4 things that she wants to build, and she's going to use the Myers-Briggs psychological assessment here to help you figure out how to do that. Now, knowing your Myers-Briggs type can help you understand how to create positive growth in these types of capital. For instance, she refers to herself and she says, well, she's extroverted, right? So building social capital, if she wants to focus on that particular type of capital, her extroversion can help because she can connect with people. She's very bubbly, she reaches out and she connects with folks, but she can also seem maybe a little bit pushy sometimes. So there's an understanding of how your personality type both helps and hurts you in terms of what you need to do to build that sort of capital. And really, you can do that for all the personalities. All the personalities of the Myers-Briggs assessment you can use once you understand what you are and how you fit into this. You can use that to assess, again, as Michelle says, how you increase the return on your investment of your capital in those ways, right? If you want to, focus on a certain project in your life or project in your work life, you can understand what your skills and your talents are and your proclivities are versus maybe your weaknesses. You can adjust to that and you can build your capital properly using that as an understanding. Really good stuff. I mean, it's an interesting perspective. Again, it's kind of touchy-feely. I like that kind of stuff because I think that the softer skills like that are a really key part of getting value out of managing and managing projects and people and yourself. But it is got a little touchy-feely, and I think it's really fun to look at it from that perspective and think about it from that perspective, because if you're not doing that, we're all people. We bring ourselves to work every day, and you have to understand who you are and how you perceive the world.
Well, I think it's also to understand not only yourself, but understand that there are other personalities that you may clash with if you aren't aware of the fact that some people don't respond well to an extroverted person or don't respond well to, let's say, an introverted person. They don't know how to, maybe they don't know how to deal with a super introverted person. And yet those are people that you need to work with and get your job done. So I think there's also, knowing this information can help you prepare with how to deal with various types of personalities, regardless of whether whether they're introverted or extroverted or whatever. I mean, we all get a sense for how a person is and who they are, and I think it's important to learn how do you deal with this type of person and how do you relate with them in the way that builds rapport and respect and allows you both to do your jobs together, even though you may be completely different from each other. You still have to work together. You got to get something done.
Absolutely. And assuming that everybody's the same isn't really going to work.
Yeah, it doesn't work
because
they aren't.
Yeah. So, having that understanding that people have different types of personalities and and as you say, how you work with them is really important for getting along well in the workplace and in your own personal life too.
That's right. Well, we do have time for Tweet of the Week, so let's do Tweet of the Week. All right. Okay. This one came from Twitter user Cameron Morrissey, quoting basketball coach Rick Pitino. When you build bridges, you can keep crossing them.
Rick Pitino, great coach of Kentucky, Louisville, I think.
Of course you would know that.
Boston Celtics. Yeah, he's a great coach for a lot of years, so he has some good advice there. Yeah, build bridges, then you can cross them or jump off them. Yeah, that's all fine. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you for joining us on National Doughnut. What happened?
Oh man,
donuts? Is that the last one?
Thank you.
You didn't save any for me.
No, told you, man.
I think that was 6 donuts in 30 minutes. That's pretty good even for you, Dirk.
No, that's my average.
Well, enjoy your National Doughnut Day. Enjoy your Friday and your weekend. We'll see you back here for another great week of Quality Digest Daily starting on Monday and, of course, QDL next Friday. So have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you later.
So long.
Bye.
Four, three, two, one, fire.